Welcome everybody to the Survivor Bros podcast. I am Brennan, joined as always by my brother Tanner, and we just got done watching the 12th episode of Survivor 43. And what an amazing episode, Tanner. Usually I begin the podcast by asking what you thought of the episode, but I don't even need to ask this time because I know you thought it was amazing like everybody else. Truly a great episode of Survivor. So I'll just start by asking Tanner, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. That was a very accurate introduction. I feel like we've been saying this every time on this podcast, but once again, it was another fantastic episode. It was a telenovela. There was crying. There were birds being flipped. There was a lot of emotion all around. I'm a little bit heartbroken because we lost my main man, Cody, who was just an absolutely hilarious character, a great person to watch. But Jesse, in the words of Noel, did that shit. It was just incredible on his part. And then everyone else, I feel like we're going into a final five with five winners edits. Like that's what I'm looking at right now. I feel like anyone can seriously win right now, and that makes it so freaking exciting. So it sucks that there's only one episode left. I honestly can't even wrap my head around that. We're like at the very end of the season. Hopefully it's gonna be an absolutely killer finale. But this was a good penultimate episode, and if the finale continues the trend that this season's been going on, it'll only get better and better until the very end.
Definitely, yeah. A little bittersweet that the season is coming to the end, but it's definitely going to be great to see how everything wraps up and see who does end up becoming the winner. Because, like you said, you're right. There's five different people who could easily win. I mean, I know everybody, especially after this episode, everybody's leaning towards a certain Jesse to win, but weird things have happened in Survivor where the obvious winner doesn't end up winning, and if he doesn't end up winning, as heartbreaking as that would be, it would be great still to see any of the other four people win because, like you said, each person has their own story and would be a deserving winner. But let's talk a little bit about Jesse here, the main man, Jesse. Oh my God, what an incredible episode for him. I mean, God, that is so much. There's so much stuff from him, but the brutal move, the cutthroat move. What did you think of that move against Cody?
I thought it was brilliant. So Carla wanted to target Owen and Gabler, and then Cody wanted to target Carla. So he comes up with this whole plan to make her think that they're gonna bluff their idols or whatever. And then Jesse is just like this sniper off in the distance with this like secret plan out of nowhere to get Cody, and it's just a perfect snipe because Jesse has the idol. He plays it for Owen, which spooks Carla, prompting her to play her own idol on herself out of desperation, which means Jesse is now the only one with an idol, which still nobody knows about it. He just completely reworks the board in his favor in one fell swoop because with there were all these advantages running around to the point where if nobody had actually played their idols, which Carla thought was going to happen, then we could have had a potential idol get in at the final five, and somebody could have been defaulted out. Which Jesse was one of those people with the idols, so he didn't have to be too worried about it. But still, this allows him to have all the agency going forward. And like he talked about in this episode, we have been seeing Jesse and Cody as a duo, with Jesse being the main narrator, and Cody was more just the narrative focus on, or the character focus on our end. But what Jesse says and what the jury seems to agree with is that Cody is a bit louder, and they've made the same moves together so that it's Cody who actually the jury is looking at as more of a winner threat. And I think Cody was feeling very good about his chances, and had he slipped through this vote, he easily could have made it to the end. So this was the perfect time. It wasn't too early, but it wasn't really too late. Jesse was able to take him out here and remove that person who seemed a little bit bigger than him. So now he's the star. he's the person who's made all these moves that Cody's made, which they've made a ton of great moves together. I mean, all the way back to the Justine blindside, the Dwight blindside. They've always been shifting things up and reworking the board in their favor, and Justine did the ultimate version of that tonight, like I said. So now he's the main guy going into the final five. But I have to say that I am a little bit worried about him being the fallen angel here. I mean, I
Mhm.
really can see him falling into that fourth place spot, that Rick Devens losing fire making, just breaking the audience's heart. What do you think about that? I mean, do you really think that he can make it to the final three? Because he does seem like the big winner here, but I don't know. Honestly, at this point, I don't think he makes it to the end. I think he is the final four loser.
Yeah, and I think I texted you right after we ended up watching the episode, and I said it's gonna be so sad when Carla gets voted out next and Jesse loses fire making.
You
Because
did
I mean
say that.
that is the way it's looking, and God, I pray that that does not happen because please, oh God, Jesse would. I mean, we're talking about if Jesse does end up winning this game. This is, and I think I said it last week. This is a top tier winner, like top tier.
Hmm.
Like seriously, him and Cody have been controlling the entire game. And then he does this incredible move that nobody else can make. I mean, to
Seriously.
and you have to. It only works because Cody is his partner. So he did a good job of knowing who his alliance was to be able to pull off the move. And I don't think Cody's gonna be bitter. We saw that them do the handshake thing at the end, which was, I mean, I was on the verge of tears. I mean, I was so emotional. But to be able to run the game, control every vote pretty much that's happened. He's had a great social game. He's been cool with everybody. I don't think there's been anybody really that said that they said anything bad about Jesse. Not that I can remember. And then he's so close with his closest ally that his closest ally gives him his idol, lets him keep it, takes it back, and then gives it back without Jesse ever even asking for it back. And this was confirmed by Cody in the post-game interview. Jesse never actually asked for it back. Cody just gave it to him. And then
Wow. I did not see that. I didn't know that.
yeah, Cody said that in his post-game interview with Raj Cesternino. Um, and now Jesse is set up guaranteed Final Four with an idol that nobody knew about. Again, because of his social connection with Dwight. And so he's guaranteed Final Four, and he's going to have that. First of all, he just had that huge jury moment. The jury was eating that up, the big move, as they should, because it's one of
Hmm.
the greatest moves in Survivor history, honestly. It's then he's going to have that moment. And then he's going to have the Marianne moment with the idol that nobody knew about. So that is the problem. Once if he does play this idol, which I'm assuming he does,
He's
does
got to
that make?
play. There's no way he doesn't. I mean, come
I
on.
will make one singular argument for a reason that he might not play it, and that is if he does play it again. It's the Marianne moment. I think, like I'm saying, it could make him just too big of a threat to take the final three. And the thing is, I kind of think that might already be the case, but I don't know. It looked like Gabler wanted to take him before, and he seemed cool with Owen, but I don't know. I think after this movie still is a big threat anyway. But playing that idol would make him even more of a huge threat. So at that point, he has to win immunity or fire making, which he hasn't looked very good in any of the immunity challenges so far. And I don't know, maybe he's a fire whiz, but we definitely haven't been shown it. So that is why I'm definitely concerned for Jesse.
Yeah, and Jeff actually pointed out in this episode that Jesse is the only person who has yet to win an immunity challenge this season. So that could definitely be foreshadowing to his downfall because, there's a few different ways to get to the end. You can get dragged by the person who wins, you can be the person who wins immunity, or you can be the person who wins fire. And
Mhm.
like you said, we don't know how great he is at fire. We knew that Sammy was good at fire, but they got rid of him. And maybe Jesse, I think, because Jesse was the one who pointed out that Sammy was good at fire. So if Jesse were to go on to win the fire making challenge against someone who was less good at fire, then we could look back at that moment as an instance of foreshadowing where Jesse made a move in advance to get out a player that he knew would be a threat later down the line.
That's
But
interesting.
yeah, I think his path to the end right now would be to go with Owen and Gabler. But I think Gabler will start to see Jesse as because he's already pointed out
He's
that
already
Jesse is a
pointed
flip
out,
flopper.
yeah.
So I
Hmm.
think he's gonna come out from the shadows with his camouflage behind that tree and say we got to get Jesse out. And of course, Carla and Cassidy would want to get behind that if they can resolve their own little feud, which seems to be a storyline in the finale. But I think they could come together and try to eliminate Jesse at the final five, which would force him to play his idol. And if he did play his idol correctly, let's say it's like 4-1, I think that would actually be a really good case for Jesse because it's just another move that looks flashy in front of the jury. And it's just like, I think his only two people have negated votes, and he negated one of them. It was him and Carla tonight, where votes actually got negated for the first time this season. So if he were to even negate more votes at the final five, then he could even go to the end with Carla and say, look at these things I did better than her. I negated more votes than her. Even though I had my idol for less time, I got people to give me idols, whereas she had to find her own. I had to survive more tribals early on, where I had more influence early on. I had to work with less numbers. I regained connections rather than burning them, which Carla looks to have done with Cassidy, unless they can make up in the finale. But yeah, Jesse would be able to go with anyone to the end. It's just Carla wouldn't take him to the fire. Cassidy wouldn't take him past fire. Nobody would, I don't think. I
Yeah.
mean, especially with this episode, we went in with two people from each tribe. So there were three pairs there. And now Jesse is completely on his own, whereas Gabler and Owen are a stronger pair, I think, going into the finale. And Cassidy and Carla have their issues, but they have the potential to be a pair as well because they've worked together this whole time. And so for Jesse, yeah, it was an amazing move that he made to get rid of his number one ally. But now he is without the number one ally that would have taken him to the end had he won the Final Four challenge, which Cody easily could have done. But Jesse's just risking it for the biscuit at this point because he knows that he doesn't want to go to the end with like a 70% chance of winning. He wants a 100% chance of winning.
Yeah, and I think to your point earlier, I think Jesse knew that he probably, I mean, I don't know, but I think it's, if anything, it's at least really close with Cody in the end. If Jesse does
Mm-hmm.
manage to scrape out a win.
Yeah, I
Because
think
like,
Jesse would still actually have a really good shot. That's why I said 70% because I think that this jury, even though they love Cody, they respect gameplay a lot, and Jesse has gameplay that Cody doesn't necessarily have. Even going back to the very beginning with Dwight, who Jesse had in his corner, and then he also had Cody and NECA, so he was able to choose, whereas Cody was just with NECA and Jesse.
yeah, and I think that at Final Tribal, Jesse would be able to give a great speech, at least better than Cody. But again, I think it's definitely Cody was his biggest competition by far out of anyone left or anyone else left. Um, Especially the person who we've been talking about having playing such a great game up until pretty these last couple of weeks. Carla has fallen off a cliff. Tanner, what has happened to Carla recently?
Man, I don't know. I almost feel like Carla has been trying to play the amazing pre-merge game that she had this season over again at the merge, where she's keeping all these lies and trying to like manage people on different sides, where she doesn't realize that people are playing a lot harder now and everybody's telling everyone everything. So she has this somewhat convincing telenovela moment where she's telling Cassidy, I was so loyal to you. I would never throw your name out. It hurts me that you would say that. But then she tries to get Jesse to vouch for her. She tries to get Jesse to tell Cassidy that Carla is telling the truth. And maybe if this was a pre-merge game where Jesse is in Carla's alliance and he needs her, so he wants things to be all good between all of them. That's not what this is right now. This is every man for himself, and Jesse wants to drive as many wedges between as many people as possible. And so that just gave Jesse the green light to go right ahead and confirm Cassidy's suspicions, which, like she said, she would be naive not to believe that Carla was going to write her name down. And even though Carla did that damage control, it meant nothing. In fact, it actually made her look worse because she just lied again, and she proved that she can pull out the emotions and she can pull out all the stops to try to convince people of things. And even when she was saying to Cassidy, your body language is making me think that you're trying to vote me out, that was an accurate read on Carla's part. So that is just giving Cassidy a little bit more information, like, look at how strategic I am and look at how I can try to read people like that. And Cassidy's like, yeah, you know what, Carla? I actually am going to try to vote you out. So Carla's just been spiraling, and then she lies about her idol at the reward, and that just doesn't work at all. It completely removes the surprise element of her idol because Cassidy ends up telling everyone, even though with the beads twist, it seems like people knew already, so I'm not quite sure why she would think. Again, it's just like, yeah, if it's the pre-merge, then you might want to lie about your idol and keep that under wraps because idols are going to make you more of a target later on. But at this point, there's not really a later on to be worried about. It's just the final 6 and the final 5. So she should have just had that plan from the jump about bluffing their idols instead of trying to hide that she had an idol at all. And I mean, yeah, it's just examples like that everywhere at this point. I still love Carla, and she's a great player. She said that if her plan works, then you'll be seeing me in the Final Four, which kind of makes me think we won't be seeing her in the Final Four. But if she does get to the Final Four, then that would reestablish faith in Carla a little bit. And I'd say, okay, maybe we could get a strong push from her in the finale, and then she can convince the jury that she deserves a win because she has played a strong social game. But I think Jesse has outclassed her both strategically in the end game as well as his social maneuvering early on to position players where he wanted them to be, whereas Carla kind of let her alliance go a little bit. She had a really strong loyalty-based game going early on where everyone trusted her, but she had a core group with James and Cassidy who she could trust, and she made decisions with them. But now she doesn't have Cassidy in her corner, and she obviously lost James, which she didn't want to go with, but she didn't have a choice in the matter, and so her agency has just been slipping and slipping, and she hasn't been adapting the way that she needed to adapt. So that's why we're kind of looking at Carla at the bottom of this cliff here.
Great analysis there, yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure I see Carla's path to the end. I mean, because I think in the mind of everybody, it's out there, it's still, well, now it's Jesse at the top for sure, then Carla. So either Jesse plays his idol without everyone knowing, and he plays it well, 4-1, whatever. I think he would still vote out Carla. If let's say Jesse wins immunity or makes it known that he's playing his idol, and they decide to vote someone else, then I think the rest would still vote out Carla. So I think her only chance is to win immunity. And she got pretty close to winning this immunity challenge, if not for her hands freezing up. What did you think about that moment and this challenge as a whole?
Yeah, so there were 2 moments in this challenge that were like my greatest Survivor fears. And the first one was when Owen forgot his key before he started racing through the net and he had to go back and get it. I'm always worried about like missing some element of a challenge or like going forward to do something and Jeff's like, no, you're wrong. But
Yeah.
the second one was when Carla was seriously, I think she was about to win that challenge. I honestly think that
Mhm.
had her hands not just started cramping and spazzing out, she could have done that. And I know what it's like to have bad cramps, and those things make you feel like you're dying. So on Survivor, when you're dehydrated and you're exhausted, and especially with the injuries that she'd already had, like Jeff said, she's had hand troubles this whole season. It must be compounded the pain that she was going through. And so I totally feel for her. Having that moment just completely in her grasp and then ripped out of her hands must be totally brutal. And I completely empathize after the challenge when everybody was celebrating and she goes off and just sits down and she's just like, man, I mean, that was awful. So, yeah, I feel really bad for her, but honestly, I mean, if she were to get to the end, that would be something she could potentially use in a jury speech like, hey, I kept fighting and I might have had this
Mhm.
other immunity win. Not to try to take away from Cassidy's win, but just to say that I kept fighting through the pain and no matter what the game threw at me, I kept going forward, which she could also tie into losing her alliances and stuff like that. So at least there's a little bit of a silver lining.
Yeah, I saw someone online say that we've been seeing a lot of stuff about Carla's hands, and maybe that ties into a potential fire loss for
Oh,
Carla.
oh no. Hopefully it doesn't cramp like that when she's about to win the fire
Oh,
ranking and then
geez.
she
Oh,
loses.
God. Maybe she'll burn her hands like Mike Scoopin.
Oh, God. Please don't pass out when you're making the fire.
Yeah. Oh, God. Don't even want to think about that. But Carla, not the only person who came really close to winning this challenge. Cody, the other person who, had they won, would have been guaranteed Final Four with immunity, came seconds away from winning this challenge. I mean, God, that was as close as a challenge has been. I mean, since Wendell didn't say I got it done or whatever. I
Yeah, I
mean,
like how Cassidy immediately was like, I'm
yeah,
done,
yeah,
Jeff, Jeff.
yeah.
Like
That's
she
what
was
you gotta
remembering the
do.
Wendell moment.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you gotta scream his name as fast as you can. Even when you're just like putting that last piece in, you got
Yeah, she was still putting it in.
yeah. But that was a cool puzzle, the bat thing. That was a cool one, and it came down to the very end. So I think it was a great challenge overall.
Yeah, I thought it was a fun challenge. I like how Jeff gave a little shout out to the puzzle designers and how they make it seem hard or make it seem easy when it's actually really hard.
Mhm.
Um, but I actually really liked the reward challenge that we had, which was
The Russell
the
Swan one.
yeah, I was about to say the Russell Swan painting challenge. I was watching them do that do that maze, and I was like, oh, that's a pretty sharp corner right there. You guys better watch out. But what did you think of this reward where we have two teams of three and one person is like strapped inside this wooden ball frame and they're being spun around by the other two people who are blindfolded and the one person in the ball is trying to navigate them through this obstacle course and then to do the ball maze. I think it's a pretty fun challenge, but it's one of those where you see the people get injured and you're just like, oh, man, like I think Cody had a pretty rough hit early on, and so that was a little bit cringy. But um, we had the pastries and iced tea and iced coffee reward, and you gotta love how Jeff says donuts, and he's just it's like all the fixins. He's just going
All
off
the
like this.
fixins. All the
I
fixins.
mean, yeah. So Jeff's giving us his little isms, but overall it was pretty fun. What do you think of this reward challenge?
Yeah, I really liked it. While I was watching it, I was trying to think because I always thought that I would hate doing the blindfolded challenges because, like you said,
Mm,
we pretty much always, no matter what happens, we see at least a little bit of people getting hurt, running into something, whatever, and just not knowing where you'd be. I'd always be like super cautious with where I was stepping. But the other position in the challenge, being strapped inside of that ball, constantly being rotated, I don't know. I feel like I would get dizzy pretty fast and might end up yakking on one of the people trying to push me. So I was trying to figure out if I had to do this challenge, which one would I want to be? Because I don't know. They both seem kind of bad to me. But usually the ones that are hardest on the contestants are the most entertaining to watch. And
Hmm.
I think Owen did a really good job in this challenge, really being clear with what he was saying. They went through really fast. Everyone kind of knew what they were doing. And they got to the puzzle, and he was in a nice upright position, so he was able to call the maze really well. And overall, it did come down to the end though, and I actually didn't know who was gonna win. It was a pretty intense moment. So yeah, I thought it was a really entertaining challenge to watch, and I'm glad they keep bringing back these classic challenges. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. It's always fun to see a challenge where someone literally got medevaced on. It just adds a whole another layer to it. But I think if I were doing this challenge, I'd want to be inside the ball in Owen and Cassidy's position. Even if I throw up, I can use that as my story. Like, hey, I threw up and I still
Yeah.
pushed through this challenge.
Look
But
at David. He just threw up, but that's not gonna stop him. Way to fight.
yeah, Jeff would just milk that so
Uh,
hard.
this is
But
Survivor.
Owen had a really good confessional though going into the reward after they won it. He said, I want to get Carla and Cody's pulse on the game going into this critical final six vote. And I thought that was very interesting because Owen wasn't necessarily the main character of this episode, nor has he been the main character of the season. But we always get Owen's perspective on things,
Mhm.
which is starting to like I said, winner edit vibes, and I said everyone has a winner edit, but I'm starting to look at Owen as the actual potential winner edit wise, which is sort of confusing me because I'm looking at the people who are left and the people who are on the jury, and no disrespect to Owen at all because I think he's amazing, but I just don't think he has had enough agency in the game so far to warrant enough jury votes to win against obviously a Jesse or a Carla, but also a Cassidy or a Gabler who have their own amazing stories. Owen's been the scrappy underdog, the Charlie Brown, and he's been fighting strategically. The edit has been making sure to show us that he's really trying and his head in the game here, and he's trying to spearhead moves, but he's not really spearheading the moves. He's just being brought along for the ride, I feel like, on a lot of these things that are going down where he's not being left in the dark, which has been a common theme this season. So I think if he has a strong finale where he's able to somehow dictate the final five vote despite Jesse's idol and despite whatever makes him so pissed in the preview for next episode, he's
Yeah.
able to navigate that, and then he's able to dictate the final four. Let's say he wins immunity and then takes Gabler to the end, which removes a little bit of Gabler's agency, and then takes out Jesse. Or let's say Owen wins immunity and then gives up immunity to face Jesse himself in fire making. I feel like that could be the move that could push Owen to the win here. But based on the edit, I mean, he had that confessional, and then he also had a confessional at the very beginning of this episode where he talked about how Carla was supposed to vote Cassidy and how that made him upset because he wanted to drive a wedge between them. Again, that's Owen saying that he wants to do something. And Owen did not need to have that confessional at all. Maybe they could just be deliberately misleading us because they know that we're looking at the edit. But why would they give that to Owen unless we're supposed to know that Owen is really important here? Because if Carla would end up winning the season, I feel like we would definitely hear her talk about that.
Yeah, and so going back to your point about Owen being kind of dragged along, yeah, he had like it seems like he always is just agreeing with the plan. Like we see him in this episode, Cody comes up to with a plan. Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. All right, cool. And then Jesse comes up to like with a complete opposite plan. He's like, oh yeah, 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 that's cool.
Exactly.
But it's I almost kind of think that that is a skill in its own right. like we talked about earlier in the season with Carla, a ton of people just constantly going up to her with their plans. I think if you're able to have a bunch of people come up to you with their plan, I think that's almost just as good as making the plan as yourself because you're part of the plan. So you're helping dictate what's happening, but you don't necessarily have the blood on your hands. But I think you're right about the jury. I think he does need to do something to have the agency that the jury is looking for to win the game. And yeah, I've thought about it before when you just said um, him winning immunity and giving up his necklace to fire making against Jesse. I think that would be so awesome. And everybody hates Edge's extinction, and kind of rightfully so. But I've always loved. I'm giving up my necklace, and I'm going to be making fire against Rick Devens tonight.
Mhm.
I get a tear in my eye every time I see that clip, and I think it's such a great moment. And if Owen does that here, it would have his big move. It would have his agency. It would be the most recent big move for the jury to see. It would be taking out the biggest threat. And on top of that, he hasn't pissed anybody off really on the jury except for James. So I think
Mhm.
Owen definitely has a chance to win if a couple things here go his right in the finale.
Yeah, definitely. What about Gabler though? I mean, I feel like
I didn't even
Gabler
talk
has had a
about
lot
it.
of really good confessionals, but I mean, similar to Owen, lacks agency, but I think Gabler has actually had a few more instances than Owen where he's flipped his vote and been on the right side of the numbers. I think it was the Dwight vote, maybe, and the Noel vote where Gabler kind of,
He's definitely been more involved than Owen.
yeah, for sure. But I mean, do you think that he can really win here? Well, obviously he can win, but like, what do you think his chances are next to everybody else?
Well, the thing is, right now you can't see him. You can't see him. He's blending in with the trees because his moves, like you said, are like an assassin. You don't go up with the knife just going up to the person. You put a little poison in the soup, but then you leave. And we saw him plant the seed. Obviously, we don't know if this was his seed, or Jesse had already been stewing on it for a while. But he planted the seed to Jesse and Cassidy that Cody and Carla had played really similar games. And I feel like we've seen a lot of that from him, kind of not really coming up with a plan, but maybe planting a few seeds and then having somebody else come up with a plan and come to you. And I think first of all, I don't think there's any way Gabler like almost doesn't make it to the final three because who's going to put him against fire making? I
Hmm.
don't, because I think if Cassidy wins and she put Owen against um, Jesse. Maybe Owen would put Gabler against Jesse in fire making. But I think Gabler has kind of, if he's able to explain the moves that he's made, the subtle moves, the putting the poison in the soup. If he's able to explain that and he finds himself with Owen and Cassidy in the final three, I think he definitely could win that.
Hmm. And yeah, I mean, when you said that he planted the seeds tonight, I remember him being the first one to say that Cody and Carla should be targeted, and they ended up both being targeted, and then
Hmm.
Owen and Gabler was spared. And the only thing that worries me about that is that someone like Jesse, who let's say he gets fourth and he ends up on the jury, he could start telling the jury that that was all like his idea and that Gabler's just taking credit for things. But I just remember the Ellie vote, and that was a situation where Gabler fully demonstrated that he wanted this person out and he was going to make a move to make that happen. So now we know that Gabler has the ability to carry out moves like that. So when he says he does something a little more subtle, we can actually believe him because we know that he's not just some coattail rider and he's not just someone who takes directions from other people. So a move that we thought was really bad at the time in the Ellie vote could actually prove to be one of the things that saves his game for the jury, especially because Ellie didn't make the jury, so she wasn't able to sour the jury on him. And we have a
Yep.
bunch of people who have gotten to know Gabler really well. I mean, going back to his story about the veterans and PTSD and that one immunity challenge, we forget that he won immunity against all these people. So if you really look at all these categories of the game, making moves, the social aspect, the competition aspect, Gabler is absolutely there. But, I also think Cassidy is there as well. Cassidy has won a few good immunities, and she's been playing. I mean, she said that everyone she wants to go home goes home. And that's
It's
pretty much,
happened.
it still happened, even going into finale. So that is hugely impressive, and that could be another extremely powerful winner confessional if she ends up becoming the winner. So, yeah, the 5 people, we just went through all of them. I mean, we haven't talked about Cassidy as much, but she's absolutely in there. They're all in there.
Absolutely, especially if she gets Carla out this next vote. That'll be
Hmm.
big.
Yeah, because we talked about early on how Carla was kind of the figurehead of that Coco trio. And
Hmm.
if Cassidy's the only one left, then she did her job right. She hid in the shadows in order to outlast the people who are maybe a little bit louder than her. And that's not a bad strategy at all. The silent assassin, she did it better than most of us ever could.
Definitely. You have anything else on this episode?
Um, no, I mean, we finally had a really good suspenseful tribal. I liked Jesse's idol play and then Carla's idol play and the suspense leading up to that. I think there was like a really long segment after Jeff said if anybody has an idol advantage and wants to play it. And it was like showing everybody's faces. That was really hyped. That pause when Cody or when Jesse was reaching out his hand and Cody was like deciding what to do and then he finally takes it. That was epic. That was a really nice, really small moment, but you could just feel the entire game like reverberating into that moment
Yeah.
because Cody and Jesse had just been such a duo and such a storyline this season, and it came to a head almost like the Tony and Sarah situation at Final Four, but it was right before the finale, so now we've got 5 players, 2 from Coco, 2 from Baca. I think the 2 that from Baca that we would have expected the least to see here,
Yeah,
Gabler and
actually,
Owen.
yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
And then Jesse, who's now voted out every one of his original tribe mates. So kudos to him.
Yeah, and that was such a great moment. I said before I was getting a little emotional. I for a second I thought Cody wasn't going to shake his hand because you saw him like, God, when he was sitting there like right next to him just staring at him. He's like, really, bro?
That was
God, I was,
hard.
oh man. But what a great moment. What a great all-time Survivor move and Survivor episode. It really reinvigorates your love for Survivor. It really
It
does.
does. It does.
We've been needing an episode like this. But
Hmm.
with that being said, I want to thank everybody for watching. We hope you had a good time, and we will be back next week to recap the finale of Survivor 43. Can't believe it already. Time flies when you're having fun. But we hope you all join us next week. But until then, keep talking Survivor, bros.